A Korean mafia boss chased her taxi after seeing a black, beautiful woman. On a rainy evening in Seoul's bustling Gangnam district, Amara, an American exchange student, just wanted to catch a cab and get back to her small apartment after another disappointing day of job interviews. The neon lights reflected off wet pavement as locals rushed past with umbrellas, barely noticing the tall black woman standing alone at the curb. She finally flagged down a cab and climbed inside, exhausted and ready to forget this city that seemed determined to reject her. But as her taxi pulled away from the curb, Amara glanced back through the rear window and saw something that made her heart stop. A man in an expensive black suit was running after her cab, his hand raised, his eyes locked on hers with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. The driver didn't notice, and within seconds they turned the corner, leaving the strange man behind. Amara had no idea that those few seconds of eye contact with Jin-woo Park would set off a chain of events that would pull her into a dangerous world she never knew existed. Before we continue, let us know where you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because the next parts of this story will leave you speechless. 3 months earlier, Amara Jackson had arrived in Seoul with dreams bigger than her budget and hope stronger than her doubts. At 26 years old, she had saved every penny from her job as a junior graphic designer in Atlanta to fund this adventure. South Korea had always fascinated her, ever since her college roommate introduced her to Korean dramas and music. But it wasn't just entertainment that drew her. Amara saw opportunity. She had read about Seoul's booming creative industry, the tech startups, the international companies looking for fresh talent. With her portfolio and determination, she believed she could make it work. The reality hit harder than she expected. Her tiny apartment in Mapo district was barely big enough for a bed and a desk. The language barrier was thicker than she had imagined, despite the 3 months of Korean lessons she had taken online. And the job interviews, those painful meetings where she watched enthusiasm drain from recruiters' faces the moment she walked in, were slowly crushing her spirit. Some were polite but distant. Others barely hid their surprise at seeing a black woman applying for creative positions. A few asked questions about her background that felt more like interrogations than interviews. Amara had dealt with prejudice before, growing up in the American South, but this was different. Here, she was not just a minority, but a complete outsider, someone who didn't fit into the neat categories the society seemed to prefer. Her savings were running dangerously low. She had maybe 2 more months before she would have to admit defeat and buy a ticket back home, back to her mother's worried face and her friends' sympathetic but knowing looks that said they had expected this all along. That rainy evening in Gangnam, she had just left her 5th interview of the week. The creative director of a small advertising agency had seemed interested at first, impressed by her portfolio. But when Amara mentioned she was still looking for sponsorship for a proper work visa, the conversation ended quickly. They would keep her information on file, he said, but they really needed someone who could start immediately. It was always something. Always a reason that felt like an excuse. Amara stood on the street corner, rain soaking through her jacket because she had forgotten her umbrella at the coffee shop that morning. She was too tired to go back for it, too defeated to care about being wet. She just wanted to go home, eat the instant ramen sitting in her cupboard, and watch something mindless until she fell asleep. She raised her hand for a taxi, and after several passed her by, one finally stopped. The driver was an older man who barely glanced at her as she gave him her address in broken Korean. He grunted acknowledgement and pulled into traffic. Amara leaned her head against the cold window, watching the city lights blur through rain and glass. Seoul was beautiful at night, she had to admit. The way the modern skyscrapers stood beside traditional architecture, how the Han River reflected the endless lights, the energy of millions of people living their lives in this compact, vibrant space. She had wanted so badly to be part of it. That's when she saw him. They were stopped at a red light, and Amara happened to glance to her right. A black Mercedes was pulling up beside them. In the back seat, a man sat alone. Even through 2 layers of rain-streaked windows, Amara could see he was striking. Sharp features, dark hair swept back, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her entire month's rent. But it was his eyes that caught her. He was looking directly at her, and there was something in his gaze. Recognition, maybe? Or surprise? Or something else she couldn't name. For just a moment, their eyes met. Amara felt a jolt, like static electricity, like recognition even though she had never seen this man before in her life. He looked at her as if she was someone important, someone he had been searching for. It was intense and unsettling, and somehow sad all at once. Then the light changed. Her taxi lurched forward. Amara turned to look back through the rear window, and that's when she saw him throw open his car door and start running after her cab. He was actually running, this man in his expensive suit, chasing her cab down the street. His driver had gotten out too, shouting something, but the man ignored him. He was fast, she had to give him that, but the taxi was faster. They turned the corner and he disappeared from view, swallowed by the crowds and the rain and the endless maze of Seoul's streets. Amara's heart was pounding. What the hell was that? She looked at the taxi driver, but he seemed oblivious, listening to the radio and humming along to some ballad. She thought about telling him to stop, to go back, but what would she say? A strange man chased our taxi and I want to know why? That sounded insane even in her head. Maybe she had imagined the intensity of the moment. Maybe he had been trying to flag down the taxi for himself and she had misread the situation. But no, she had seen his face. He had been looking at her specifically. At her. By the time Amara got back to her apartment, she had almost convinced herself it was nothing, just another weird moment in a city full of them. She changed into dry clothes, made her ramen, and tried to focus on a drama she had been watching. But she kept seeing those eyes, kept feeling that jolt of connection that made no sense. She didn't know that across the city, in a penthouse overlooking the Han River, Jin-woo Park was standing at his window, a glass of whiskey forgotten in his hand, staring out at the rain and the lights, and seeing nothing but the face of a woman who looked exactly like someone he had lost, someone he thought he would never see again, someone who had been dead for 3 years. Jin-woo Park was not a man who believed in ghosts or reincarnation or fate. He was a man who dealt in facts, in power, in the cold mathematics of control. At 34 years old, he ran one of Seoul's most sophisticated operations, a network that moved money and influence through channels both legal and very much not. His official businesses, a chain of high-end nightclubs, several restaurants, a property development company, were profitable and respected. His unofficial businesses were what gave him real power. He had inherited the foundation from his father, a man who had built an empire from nothing in the years after the Korean War, but Jin-woo had modernized it, made it sophisticated. He didn't deal in violence or drugs or any of the crude operations that attracted police attention. He dealt in information, in leverage, in knowing what people wanted and what they feared. He owned debts and secrets. He was the man you came to when you needed something done quietly, when legal channels moved too slowly or asked too many questions. Most people in Seoul had no idea who he was. That's how he liked it. The police knew, of course, but he was careful, always operating through layers of legitimate businesses and trusted associates. He had never been arrested, never even questioned seriously. To the public, he was just another wealthy businessman with good connections and better lawyers. But to those who moved in his world, Jin-woo Park was feared and respected in equal measure. He was known for being intelligent, strategic, and absolutely ruthless when necessary. He kept his word, which was rare in his line of work, and he never let emotion cloud his judgment, which was even rarer. At least, that's what everyone believed. Until 3 years ago, when he met Naomi. Naomi had been different from anyone Jin-woo had ever known. She was a journalist, American, working for an international news organization, doing a series on modern Seoul. She had somehow gotten an interview with him, presenting it as a profile of successful young entrepreneurs. Jinwoo agreed because he was always careful to maintain his legitimate image, and because he was curious about this bold American woman who had tracked him down despite his carefully maintained privacy. The interview was supposed to last an hour. They talked for 3. Naomi was sharp, funny, unimpressed by his wealth or his carefully crafted persona. She asked real questions, pushed back on his rehearsed answers, made him think about things he usually didn't question. She was also beautiful, with dark skin that glowed in the sunlight, natural hair she wore in elaborate styles that changed every time he saw her, and a smile that made him forget to be careful. He knew better, knew that getting involved with anyone was a weakness, that people in his position couldn't afford genuine attachments because attachments became leverage. But Naomi made him want to be reckless. For the first time in his adult life, Jin-woo found himself caring about something more than business, more than power. He found himself imagining a different life, one where he could be honest about who he was, where he didn't have to constantly calculate angles and risks. They had 13 months together. 13 months of secret meetings, of Jin-woo gradually letting his guard down, of Naomi slowly understanding what kind of man she had gotten involved with. She knew what he was, though he never gave her specifics. She was a journalist, after all. She could read between lines and connect dots. But she stayed anyway. She said she saw something in him worth saving, some core of decency buried under years of calculated survival. Jin-woo started to believe her, started to think about ways to gradually extract himself from the life, to build something clean. It would take years, maybe decades, to untangle himself from all the obligations and debts and dangerous knowledge that bound him to his world. But he was willing to try. For her. For the future she made him believe in. Then she died. A car accident, the police said. Rainy night, slick roads, a truck driver who fell asleep at the wheel. Naomi's taxi had been hit head-on. She died on the way to the hospital. Quick, they told him. She didn't suffer. As if that made it better. As if knowing she didn't suffer would fill the enormous void her absence created. Jin-woo went to the funeral, standing at the back, unknown to her colleagues and friends. He watched them put her in the ground and felt something in himself die with her. After that, he stopped pretending there was any way out of his life. He threw himself back into work, became harder, more focused, more feared. He didn't make attachments, didn't let anyone close, didn't believe in anything except the cold certainty of power and control. For 3 years, that worked. He built his empire larger, his influence deeper. He stopped feeling anything except the occasional satisfaction of a deal well executed. He didn't miss Naomi because he didn't let himself remember her. Memory was indulgent. Memory was weak. Then he saw Amara in that taxi, and every defense he had built came crashing down. For a moment, just a moment, he thought it was actually Naomi. Same face, same presence, something he couldn't name. His body moved before his mind caught up, throwing open the car door, running after the taxi like a madman. By the time rationality returned, the taxi was gone, and his driver was staring at him like he had lost his mind. Maybe he had. Jin-woo stood on that street wet, breathing hard, and felt more alive than he had in 3 years. Because even though he knew it couldn't be Naomi, even though he knew he had just seen a stranger who happened to look like her, something had shifted. Some part of him that he thought was safely dead had woken up, and it wanted to find that woman in the taxi. His driver, Min-soo, approached carefully. Min-soo had been with Jin-woo for a decade, long enough to know when to speak and when to stay silent. This was definitely a stay silent moment, but Jin-woo spoke first. "Find her," he said quietly. "Find out who she is, where she lives. Everything." Min-soo didn't ask questions. That's why he had lasted so long. That night, Jin-woo stood at his penthouse window and admitted to himself what he was doing. He was chasing a ghost, chasing a resemblance, a moment of impossible recognition, a feeling he had no right to pursue. It was stupid and dangerous and exactly the kind of emotional decision he had sworn off. But he didn't care. He needed to see her face again, to confirm she was real and not some grief-induced hallucination. He needed to know who she was. He didn't know yet that finding Amara Jackson would do more than ease his curiosity. He didn't know that it would pull her into his world in ways that would endanger them both. He didn't know that some of his enemies had already noticed his moment of weakness on that street, and were starting to wonder what would make Jin-Woo Park, the man who never showed emotion, chase after a taxi in the rain. All he knew was that he had to find her. And Jin-Woo Park was a man who always got what he wanted, no matter what it cost, no matter who got hurt. That's who he was. That's who he had to be, even if some buried part of him whispered that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. This time, the cost might be too high. But he had already started down this path, and there was no turning back now. The moment he chased that taxi, he had set something in motion, something that would change everything, for both of them. Amara woke up the next morning with a headache and a sense of unease she couldn't shake. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving Seoul washed clean and glittering under a rare, clear sky. She made instant coffee and sat at her tiny desk, staring at her laptop screen without really seeing it. She had 3 more job applications to send out, but her mind kept drifting back to that man in the Mercedes. Those eyes, that moment of connection that felt both impossible and undeniable. She forced herself to focus. This was ridiculous. She was in a foreign country with dwindling savings and no job prospects. She didn't have time to daydream about strange men who chased taxis. Probably he had been drunk or high or just eccentric in the way very rich people could afford to be. It meant nothing. She would never see him again. Seoul was a city of 10 million people. The odds of randomly encountering the same person twice were astronomical. By noon, Amara had sent her applications and decided she needed to get out of her apartment before the walls closed in completely. She grabbed her camera, the one luxury she had allowed herself to bring from home, and headed out. Photography had always been her escape, her way of processing the world when it became too much. She took the subway to Bukchon Hanok village, where traditional Korean houses lined narrow streets, creating pockets of old Seoul amid the modern city. The village was full of tourists, mostly couples taking selfies against the backdrop of curved tile roofs and wooden architecture. Amara wandered away from the main paths, finding quieter alleys where afternoon light fell in golden slants across stone walls. She lost herself in composition and light, in the meditation of seeing the world through a lens. For a little while, she forgot about job rejections and mysterious men and the growing fear that she had made a terrible mistake coming here. She was crouched down, trying to capture the shadow pattern of a tree branch against a white wall, when she heard footsteps stop behind her. She assumed it was another tourist waiting for her to move, so she quickly took her shot and stood up, turning with an apologetic smile. The smile froze on her face. It was him, the man from the Mercedes, standing 3 feet away, wearing casual clothes today, dark jeans and a black sweater, but somehow still looking like he had stepped out of a magazine. And he was staring at her with that same intensity, that same look of recognition that made no sense. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amara's heart was hammering so hard she was sure he could hear it. This wasn't a coincidence. Couldn't be. Seoul was huge, and he had found her in a random neighborhood on a random afternoon, which meant he had been looking, which meant yesterday hadn't been some random impulse. He had wanted to find her specifically. "I'm sorry," he said finally, and his English was perfect, barely accented. "I didn't mean to startle you." His voice was deeper than she expected, quiet and controlled, but there was something underneath the control, something that sounded almost uncertain. Amara found her voice, though it came out shakier than she wanted. "You were in the taxi yesterday. You chased us." It wasn't a question. She needed him to acknowledge it, to confirm she hadn't imagined the whole thing. He nodded slowly. "I did. I know how that must have looked." He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You reminded me of someone I lost. I reacted without thinking." There was pain in his voice when he said it, real and raw, despite his attempts to hide it. Amara felt her fear shift slightly, making room for curiosity. "Who did I remind you of?" she asked, and she was surprised by how gentle her own voice sounded. "Someone important," he said, and didn't elaborate. He looked away, jaw tight, and Amara saw him gathering himself, rebuilding whatever walls had cracked in that admission. When he looked back at her, his expression was more neutral, more carefully blank. "My name is Jin-woo Park. I own several businesses here in Seoul. I wanted to apologize for yesterday and to make sure I hadn't frightened you." It was a reasonable explanation, almost too reasonable. Amara studied his face, looking for deception, but all she saw was exhaustion and something that might have been loneliness. She made a decision that her more cautious self would question later. "I'm Amara Jackson, and yes, you scared me, but I'm okay now." Something shifted in his expression. Relief, maybe? Or surprise that she was still talking to him. "Are you visiting Seoul?" he asked, and it was such a normal question, such a standard conversation starter, that Amara almost laughed. "Trying to move here," she said. "Not going well so far." She didn't know why she was being honest with this stranger, this man who had tracked her down in a city of millions. Maybe because he had been honest first, or because there was something about him that made her want to drop her own defenses. "What kind of work are you looking for?" Jinwoo asked, and he sounded genuinely interested, not just making polite conversation. "Graphic design, branding, anything creative, really," Amara said. "I have experience and a decent portfolio, but nobody wants to sponsor a work visa for someone they just met. And I think," she hesitated, then pushed forward, "I think some places aren't interested because of how I look." Jinwoo's expression darkened. "That's unacceptable," he said flatly. "Seoul is better than that. Or it should be." He paused, and Amara could almost see him thinking, calculating something. "I might be able to help. One of my businesses is a marketing and events company. We work with international clients, so English fluency is valuable, and we're always looking for creative talent." Amara's first instinct was suspicion. This was too convenient, too perfect. But she was also desperate, and she had learned that sometimes opportunities came from unexpected places. "What's the catch?" she asked bluntly. Jinwoo smiled, and it transformed his face, making him look younger and less intimidating. "No catch. I'm a businessman, and you have skills I can use. If you're interested, come to my office tomorrow, and we can discuss details." He pulled a business card from his wallet and held it out. The card was simple, expensive looking, with his name and a Gangnam address embossed in silver. Amara took the card, their fingers brushing for a moment. That same jolt of connection, like touching a live wire. She saw him feel it too, saw his eyes widen slightly before he pulled his hand back. "I'll think about it," she said, though they both knew she would come. She needed this too badly to let pride or caution stop her. Jinwoo nodded. "Tomorrow at 2, if you decide. No pressure." He stepped back, giving her space, and Amara realized he was deliberately trying not to overwhelm her. For someone who had chased down her taxi, he was being remarkably respectful of boundaries now. Before she could second-guess herself, Amara asked the question burning in her mind. "The person you remind me of, what happened to her?" She knew she was overstepping, that this was too personal for strangers, but she had to know. Pain flashed across Jinwoo's face again, quickly suppressed. "She died," he said simply, 3 years ago. And then, as if he couldn't help himself, "You look exactly like her. It's uncanny. I know you're not her, but seeing you yesterday, it was like the past 3 years disappeared." He stopped, clearly regretting saying so much. "I'm sorry," Amara said, and meant it. "Losing someone you love is terrible. I lost my father 5 years ago. It still hurts." They stood in that narrow alley, two strangers bound by grief and an inexplicable connection, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared pain. Then Jinwoo nodded once and turned to leave. "Tomorrow at 2, he said over his shoulder. "Or not. The choice is yours." Amara watched him walk away, disappearing around a corner into the flow of tourists and locals. She looked down at the business card in her hand. Park Jin-woo, Chief Executive Officer, Park Industries. The address was in one of Seoul's most expensive districts. She pulled out her phone and did a quick search. Park Industries owned luxury nightclubs, restaurants, property. The company was worth millions, and the CEO had just offered her a job. It was too good to be true, which usually meant it was, but Amara thought about her dwindling bank account, about the rejection emails piling up in her inbox, about the plane ticket home she would have to buy in a few weeks if nothing changed. She thought about Jinwoo's face when he talked about the woman who died, the real grief she had seen there. He didn't seem like a predator or a con artist. He seemed like a man haunted by loss, reaching out to someone who reminded him of what he had. Maybe that should worry her more. Maybe she was being stupid, ignoring red flags because she was desperate. But desperation had brought her to Seoul in the first place. Desperation and hope, and the belief that sometimes you had to take risks to get what you wanted. She would go tomorrow. She would see his office, hear his offer, and decide then. She was running out of options, and she had never been good at playing it safe anyway. That evening, Amara called her best friend, Keisha, back in Atlanta. It was early morning there, but Keisha was always up early, training for whatever marathon she had signed up for. "Girl, you need to be careful," Keisha said after Amara explained the situation. "A rich man tracks you down and offers you a job out of nowhere? That's literally the plot of every true crime documentary." "I know it sounds," Amara said, "but I don't think he's dangerous, just sad. And I'm out of options, Keisha. I've got maybe 6 more weeks before I have to come home." "Then come home," Keisha said gently. "There's no shame in it. You tried. Sometimes things don't work out." But Amara didn't want to give up yet, didn't want to admit defeat and slink back with nothing to show for her gamble. "I'm going to check it out, just see what he's offering. If it seems sketchy, I'll walk away." "Promise me you'll be smart with this," Keisha insisted. "Meet him in public, tell someone you're going, have an exit strategy." Amara promised, and they talked for another hour about nothing important, just the comfortable conversation of people who had known each other since high school. After they hung up, Amara felt both better and worse. Better because talking to Keisha reminded her she had people who cared about her, a life waiting back home if Seoul didn't work out. Worse because it highlighted how alone she was here, how risky it was to meet with Jinwoo Park based on nothing but intuition and desperation. She didn't sleep well that night. She kept thinking about Jinwoo's face, about the woman who died, about the strange coincidence of looking like someone's lost love. Amara never believed in fate or destiny, but this felt like something, like the universe was pushing her towards something she didn't understand yet. The next afternoon, Amara dressed carefully in her best interview outfit, a navy blazer and black pants that were professional without being boring. She took the subway to Gangnam, emerged into the wealthy district with its designer stores and expensive cars. The lobby on Jinwoo's card led her to a sleek modern building, all glass and steel. Park Industries occupied the top 3 floors. The lobby was impressive, minimalist, and expensive-looking. Amara gave her name to the receptionist, a young woman who smiled professionally and made a call. "Mr. Park is expecting you. 15th floor, someone will meet you there." The elevator was fast and silent, opening onto a reception area that was even more impressive than the lobby. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed a panoramic view of Seoul, the Han River winding through the city like a silver ribbon. A young man in a suit approached, introduced himself as Min Soo, Mr. Park's assistant. He led her through a maze of offices and conference rooms, all decorated with the same minimalist aesthetic, until they reached a set of double doors at the end of a hallway. Min Soo knocked once and opened the door. "Mr. Park, Ms. Jackson is here." He stepped aside to let Amara enter, then quietly closed the door behind her. Jinwoo's office was huge, with those same floor-to-ceiling windows dominating one wall. The furniture was modern and expensive, but what caught Amara's attention were the paintings. Real art, not the generic corporate stuff she expected. Bold, abstract pieces that brought color and life to the otherwise neutral space. Jinwoo stood by the windows, backlit by afternoon sun. He turned as she entered and smiled. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Amara admitted. "This whole thing is strange, but I need a job and you're offering one, so here I am." Jinwoo gestured to a seating area, 2 leather couches facing each other across a glass coffee table. "Please, sit. Can I get you anything? Tea, coffee, water?" "Water would be good," Amara said, sitting down and trying not to look as nervous as she felt. Jinwoo went to a bar area and returned with 2 bottles of water, sitting across from her. He looked different in his office, more formal, more controlled. This was his territory, his domain, and he moved through it with complete confidence. Let me be direct, Jinwoo said, leaning forward slightly. I looked at your portfolio last night. You're talented, very talented. The branding work you did for that nonprofit was particularly impressive. You have a good eye for color and composition, and your concepts are smart and original. Amara felt a flush of pleasure at the compliment. Thank you. I've been doing design work since college. It's what I love. I can offer you a position as a senior designer with Park Marketing Solutions, one of my companies. The salary would be competitive, and we would handle your visa sponsorship. You would work on branding and marketing campaigns for our clients, mostly luxury brands and high-end hospitality. It's demanding work, but I think you would excel at it. It sounded perfect, too perfect. Amara took a breath and asked the hard question. Why are you doing this? We're strangers. You know nothing about me except that I look like someone you lost. That's not a normal reason to hire someone. Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, and Amara saw him weighing how honest to be. You're right, it's not normal. The truth is, I saw you and I reacted emotionally, which I never do. I spent 3 years shutting down emotion, focusing only on business, but seeing you broke something open. He paused, looking out the windows at the city below. I'm not hiring you because you look like Naomi. I'm hiring you because you're good at what you do and because I think having you around might remind me I'm still capable of feeling something other than ambition. It was raw and honest and more than Amara expected, and she studied his face, looking for manipulation or hidden motives, but all she saw was exhaustion and a strange kind of hope. I don't want to be someone's therapy project, she said carefully. You won't be. This is a real job with real expectations. If your work isn't good, you'll be let go like anyone else. The only difference is I'm giving you a chance that others wouldn't because of visa complications or whatever other excuses they made. I have the resources to cut through red tape. Why not use them? Amara wanted to believe him, wanted to accept this gift the universe seemed to be handing her. But years of her mother's warnings about things that seemed too good to be true made her hesitate. What about your wife or girlfriend? She asked. Won't she be uncomfortable with you hiring someone who looks like your ex? I'm not married or dating anyone, Jinwoo said. And Naomi wasn't my wife, though I wanted her to be. We were together for just over a year before she died. Not long, but long enough that losing her changed everything. There was so much sadness in his voice that Amara felt her defenses crumbling. She thought about Keisha's warnings, about every reasonable voice telling her to be careful. Then she thought about her shrinking bank account and her growing desperation, and the way Jinwoo looked at her, not with desire or predatory interest, but with something softer, like she represented possibility. Okay, she said, I'll take the job. Trial basis at first. If it doesn't work out, I walk away, no hard feelings. Relief washed over Jinwoo's face. Agreed. When can you start? Is Monday too soon? Amara asked. I don't have much else going on. Monday is perfect, Jinwoo said. Min-soo will handle the paperwork and get you set up with HR. Welcome to Park Industries, Amara. I think this is the beginning of something good. As Amara left the office an hour later, paperwork signed and start date confirmed, she felt lighter than she had in months. She had a job, a real job, with a good salary and visa sponsorship and creative work she would actually enjoy. It had fallen into her lap in the strangest possible way, but she wasn't going to question it too hard. She didn't know that Jinwoo stood at his office window for a long time after she left, watching the city and wondering what he had just set in motion. He had told himself he was just helping someone talented who needed a break, that the resemblance to Naomi was coincidental, that he was past letting grief control his decisions. But he knew he was lying to himself. He had hired Amara because having her close felt like getting back something he had lost. It was selfish and potentially dangerous, and exactly the kind of emotional decision he had sworn never to make again. But for the first time in 3 years, Jinwoo felt something other than empty. He felt hope. Fragile and frightening, but real. And that had to count for something, even if it turned out to be a mistake, even if it ended up hurting them both. He had already decided Amara Jackson was worth the risk. Now he just had to figure out how to protect her from the consequences of that decision. Because in his world, nothing came without a price, and the bill always came due eventually. Amara's first week at Park Marketing Solutions passed in a blur of introductions, orientation sessions, and getting familiar with her new workspace. The office was located on the 14th floor of the same building as Jinwoo's main office, and it was everything she could have hoped for: modern equipment, talented colleagues, and projects that actually challenged her creatively. Her coworkers were friendly enough, though she sensed some curiosity about how she had been hired so quickly. Nobody asked directly, but she caught whispered conversations that stopped when she approached. Jinwoo kept his distance, which surprised her. She had expected him to hover or check in constantly, but he seemed content to let her settle in without interference. He saw him occasionally in the elevator or passing through the office, and he always nodded politely but didn't stop to talk. It was professional and appropriate, but Amara found herself oddly disappointed. She had thought their connection was mutual, but maybe she had misread the situation. By the end of her second week, Amara was deep into her first major project, rebranding a luxury hotel chain that Park Industries had recently acquired. She was working late one evening, the office mostly empty except for a few other dedicated employees, when Jinwoo appeared at her desk. "I saw your light was still on. Working late on your first big project?" Amara looked up, surprised and pleased to see him. "Just trying to get the concepts right. This is important, and I don't want to mess it up." She gestured to her screen where several design mock-ups were displayed. "What do you think?" Jinwoo moved closer, studying the designs with genuine interest. "These are excellent," he said after a moment. "You've captured the elegance they want while still making it feel modern and fresh. The color palette is particularly smart." He pointed to one design. "This one. This is the direction you should pursue." Amara felt warmth spread through her chest at the praise. Coming from Jinwoo, it meant something. She had learned over the past 2 weeks that he had an excellent eye for design and branding, that his success wasn't just about money and connections, but about understanding what made things work aesthetically and commercially. "Thank you," she said. "I'll develop this one further." Jinwoo pulled up a chair and sat beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked. "There's something I want to talk to you about." Amara saved her work and turned to face him. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Jinwoo was quiet for a moment, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I've been keeping my distance since you started," he said finally. "I wanted you to settle in without feeling like I was watching over your shoulder, but I also want you to know that my offer to help you wasn't just about the job. If you need anything, advice about living in Seoul, help navigating the culture, or just someone to talk to, I'm available." There was something vulnerable in the way he said it, like he was offering friendship but afraid of being rejected. Amara smiled. "I appreciate that. Honestly, I've been feeling a bit isolated. My coworkers are nice, but I think they're not sure what to make of me, and making friends in a new city is harder than I expected." "It takes time," Jinwoo said. "Seoul can be a difficult place for outsiders. People here tend to stick with established social groups, but you'll find your place." He hesitated, then added, "If you're free this weekend, I could show you some parts of the city tourists don't usually see, places that might inspire your work." Amara knew she probably should decline. Getting too close to her boss was asking for complications. But she was lonely and curious and drawn to Jinwoo in ways she didn't fully understand. "I'd like that," she said, "as long as it doesn't make things weird at work." "We're both adults," Jinwoo said with a slight smile. "I think we can manage." He stood up, putting the chair back in its place. "Don't work too late. The hotel project is important, but not worth exhausting yourself over." After he left, Amara sat at her desk for a long time, staring at her designs without really seeing them. She was playing fire, and she knew it. Jinwoo was her boss. He was clearly still processing grief about his lost love, and she looked exactly like that lost love. Every reasonable part of her brain screamed that this was a bad idea, but she had never been good at listening to the reasonable parts of her brain. That's how she ended up in Seoul in the first place. Saturday arrived bright and clear, one of those perfect autumn days when the sky was impossibly blue and the air had just a hint of chill. Jinwoo picked Amara up at her apartment in a car that probably cost more than her entire year's salary, but he was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. "Good morning," he said as she climbed in. "Ready for a tour of the real Seoul?" They drove out of the central city, heading into neighborhoods Amara had never explored. Jinwoo took her to a traditional market where vendors sold everything from fresh seafood to handmade crafts. He introduced her to street food she had never tried, watching with amusement as she cautiously tasted things and then enthusiastically went back for more. They visited a temple nestled in the hills, where monks chanted their afternoon prayers and the air smelled of incense and pine trees. As they walked through the temple grounds, Jinwoo told her about growing up in Seoul, about his father who had built the family business from nothing. He was a hard man, Jinwoo said quietly. He believed in strength above everything. Emotion was weakness. Sentiment was foolish. I spent most of my childhood trying to earn his approval and never quite managing it. Did you ever get it before he died? Amara asked. Jinwoo nodded his head. He died of a heart attack when I was 28. Sudden. We never got to have the conversations I wanted. I inherited everything and realized I had spent my whole life preparing for a role I wasn't sure I wanted. He looked out over the valley below the temple, but by then I was too deep in, too many people depending on me, too many obligations. That sounds lonely, Amara said softly. She thought about her own father, about the conversations they had before cancer took him. At least they had been able to say goodbye, to tell each other the important things. She couldn't imagine losing someone with so much left unsaid. It was lonely, Jinwoo admitted, until I met Naomi. She made me think I could be different, could build something better than what my father left me. He turned to look at Amara. That's why seeing you was such a shock. You don't just look like her. You have the same presence, the same way of looking at the world. It's uncanny. Tell me about her, Amara said. If you want to. I'd like to understand. They sat on a stone bench overlooking the valley, and Jinwoo talked about Naomi, how they met, how she challenged him, how she made him laugh. He talked about her passion for justice, her fearlessness, her insistence on seeing the good in people even when they didn't deserve it. Amara listened and felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for Jinwoo's loss, curiosity about this woman who had captured his heart, and something else, something uncomfortable. Jealousy, maybe, or inadequacy? How could she ever live up to someone who clearly meant so much to him? I'm sorry, Jinwoo said suddenly. This isn't fair to you. You're your own person. You don't need to hear me go on about someone else. It's okay, Amara said. I asked. And I understand what it's like to lose someone important. My dad was my biggest supporter. When he died, I felt like I lost the one person who truly believed I could do anything. Coming to Seoul was partly about proving to myself that he was right to believe in me. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. Then Jinwoo said something that surprised her. I need to be honest with you about something. My business. It's not entirely legitimate. I mean, Park Industries is real and legal, but I have other interests, things that operate in gray areas. I wanted you to know that before we become friends, before you get too involved in my life. Amara looked at him carefully. Are you talking about illegal things? Dangerous things? Sometimes, Jinwoo said. I don't deal in violence or drugs or anything that directly hurts people, but I move money for people who don't want questions asked. I provide services that exist outside normal legal channels. I'm not a good man, Amara. I'm a necessary man in a world that runs on transactions most people don't want to know about. Why are you telling me this? Amara asked. She wasn't shocked, not really. She had suspected Jinwoo was more than just a successful businessman. Nobody accumulated that much wealth and power in their early 30s without cutting corners somewhere. Because I like you, Jinwoo said simply, and because if we're going to be friends, you deserve to know who I really am. If this changes things, if you want to keep our relationship strictly professional, I understand, but I won't lie to you. Amara thought about it. Thought about Keisha's warnings, about every sensible voice telling her to run. But she also thought about how Jinwoo had helped her when nobody else would, how he treated her with respect and honesty, how he made her feel less alone in this overwhelming city. I appreciate you being honest, she said finally. I don't love that you're involved in shady stuff, but I also know the world isn't black and white. People do what they have to do to survive. Relief washed over Jinwoo's face. Thank you for understanding. And I promise, your job is completely legitimate. You won't be involved in anything questionable. I would never put you in that position. They spent the rest of the day exploring, and the heaviness of their earlier conversation lifted. Jinwoo showed her a bookstore that specialized in English titles, a cafe that made the best coffee she had tasted since arriving in Korea, a park where local artists displayed their work on weekends. By the time he drove her home that evening, Amara felt like she understood him better. He was complicated and flawed and living with consequences of choices he made years ago, but he was also kind and thoughtful and genuinely interested in her as a person. Over the following weeks, they fell into a pattern. During work hours, Jinwoo maintained professional distance, but outside the office, they spent increasing amounts of time together. He introduced her to his favorite restaurants, took her to gallery openings and cultural events, helped her improve her Korean. Amara found herself looking forward to their time together, found herself thinking about him even when they were apart. She knew she was falling for him, knew it was probably a mistake, but she couldn't seem to stop herself. Jinwoo was unlike anyone she had ever met. He could be cold and calculating in business, but warm and surprisingly vulnerable in private. He listened when she talked about her dreams and fears. He took her opinions seriously. He made her feel valued in ways that went beyond physical attraction. The attraction was definitely there, too. Amara couldn't deny the electricity she felt whenever they were close, the way her skin tingled when their hands accidentally touched, the way her breath caught when he smiled at her. She was pretty sure he felt it, too, based on the way he sometimes looked at her, like he wanted to close the distance between them, but was holding himself back. 2 months after Amara started working for Park Industries, everything changed. It was a Friday evening, and they were having dinner at a quiet restaurant Jinwoo liked, tucked away in Itaewon. They had just finished their meal and were lingering over wine when Jinwoo's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted to something Amara had never seen before: fear. "I need to take this," he said, standing abruptly and walking outside. Amara watched through the window as he paced back and forth, phone pressed to his ear, his posture tense. When he came back inside 5 minutes later, he looked shaken. "We need to leave," he said quietly. "Now." "What's wrong?" Amara asked, already standing and grabbing her jacket. Jinwoo didn't answer until they were in his car, pulling out of the parking lot faster than was probably safe. "There's a problem," he said. "Someone I used to work with, someone dangerous, is back in Seoul. He's been asking questions about me, about people close to me." "Why is that a problem?" Amara asked, though she was pretty sure she knew the answer. "Because you're close to me," she said when Jinwoo didn't immediately respond. Jinwoo's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "His name is Kang Min-ho. We had a business arrangement years ago. He wanted to expand to territory I controlled. I refused. Things got ugly. He made threats against Naomi. A week later, she died in that car accident." Amara's blood ran cold. "You think he killed her? You think it wasn't actually an accident?" "I could never prove anything," Jinwoo said, and his voice was hard now, controlled fury beneath the calm. "The police ruled it an accident, but I know Minho. I know how he operates, and the timing was too convenient." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "He disappeared after that. Went to Japan, I heard. I thought that chapter of my life was closed. But apparently, he's back. And if he finds out about you, if he sees you as leverage against me, you could be in danger." Amara's mind was racing. This was so far beyond anything she had signed up for. She was just a graphic designer who had taken a job offer. She wasn't supposed to be caught up in whatever dangerous world Jinwoo operated in. "Take me home," she said. "I need to think." Jinwoo drove her back to her apartment in silence. When they arrived, he turned to her. "I'm sorry," he said. "I never meant for this to touch you. I'll have security watching your building tonight. Tomorrow, we'll figure out what to do next. But Amara, you need to understand how serious this is. Minho is not someone who makes empty threats." Amara nodded, feeling numb. She went up to her apartment and locked the door behind her, then immediately called Keisha. "Girl, you need to come home," Keisha said after hearing the story. "Tonight, get on the next plane and get out of there." But Amara found herself hesitating. She thought about running, about leaving Seoul and Jinwoo and the danger that now surrounded her. It would be the smart thing to do, the safe thing, but it would also mean abandoning everything she had built here, the job she loved, the life she was creating, and Jinwoo, who had become more important to her than she wanted to admit. "I can't just run," Amara said. "Not without understanding what's happening. Not without at least trying to deal with this." "Then you're braver than me," Keisha said. "Or crazier, I can't tell which." Amara didn't sleep that night. She sat by her window, watching the street below, seeing shadows everywhere. When morning came, she was exhausted, but her mind was clear. She knew what she had to do. She called Jinwoo. "I need to talk to you," she said. "In person, somewhere safe." They met at Jinwoo's penthouse an hour later. The security in his building was intense. Multiple checkpoints, and guards who looked like they knew how to handle themselves. Jinwoo's apartment was stunning, all floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist luxury, but Amara barely noticed. She had come here with purpose. "I'm not running," she told him as soon as the door closed behind them. "Whenever this threat is, we face it together, but I need you to tell me everything. No more secrets, no more protecting me from the full truth. If my life is at risk, I deserve to know why." Jinwoo looked at her for a long moment, and Amara saw a dozen emotions cross his face. Fear, admiration, something that might have been love. Then he nodded. "Sit down," he said. "This might take a while." For the next 2 hours, Jinwoo told her everything. About his father's empire and the world he had inherited, about the deals and compromises that had built his wealth, about Naomi and their plans to leave that world behind, about Minho and the war they had fought over territory and influence, about his suspicions that Naomi's death was murder disguised as accident, and his failure to prove it or get justice. By the time he finished, Amara understood exactly how deep and dark the waters were that she had waded into. But she also understood Jinwoo in a way she hadn't before. He wasn't a villain or a saint. He was a man trying to navigate an impossible situation, making the best choices he could with the options available. And he had genuinely tried to keep her out of it, had tried to protect her, even as he let her into his life. "So, what do we do now?" Amara asked. "How do we handle Minho? We find out what he wants," Jinwoo said. "Men like him always want something. Money, territory, revenge. Whatever it is, we negotiate. And if negotiation doesn't work," he paused, "then we prepare for war." Over the next week, Jinwoo's people gathered intelligence. Minho was indeed back in Seoul, setting up operations in the southern districts. He had brought muscle with him from Japan, serious people who didn't play games. And yes, he had been asking about Jinwoo, asking about his businesses, his associates, his vulnerabilities. Several people mentioned seeing Jinwoo with a foreign woman, a Black American who seemed important to him. Jinwoo arranged a meeting, neutral territory. His people and Minho's people watching each other across a private room in a restaurant that served as Switzerland for Seoul's underworld. Amara insisted on coming, despite Jinwoo's protests. "If this is about me, I should be there," she argued. "I'm not going to hide while you deal with threats on my behalf." Finally, Jinwoo agreed, and Amara found herself sitting beside him at a table, facing a man who might have killed the woman she resembled. Minho was younger than she expected, maybe 40, handsome in a sharp-edged way. He smiled when he saw her. "So the rumors are true," he said in English. "Jinwoo Park has found himself a new Naomi. Tell me, does she know what happened to the first one?" "Careful," Jinwoo said, and his voice was deadly quiet. Amara put a hand on his arm, feeling the tension coiled in his muscles. "Why are you back in Seoul?" she asked Minho directly. "What do you want?" Minho's smile widened. "Direct. I like that. What I want is simple. Jinwoo took something from me years ago. Territory, respect, opportunity. I want it back. And I want him to understand what it feels like to lose something precious." "If you're threatening her," Jinwoo started, but Amara cut him off. "I'm not a pawn," she said firmly. "I'm not leverage. I'm a person who makes her own choices, and I choose not to be intimidated by you." She looked Minho in the eyes. "Whatever business you have with Jinwoo, leave me out of it. Settle it between yourselves like adults instead of dragging innocent people into your power games." Minho studied her with new interest. "You're not like Naomi," he said. "She was softer, tried to see good in everyone. You have more steel in you." He leaned back. "Very well, I'll make you a deal, Jinwoo. You give me 3 of your southern operations. Full ownership, clean transfer. In return, I leave your lady alone, I leave you alone. We go back to pretending the other doesn't exist." Jinwoo was quiet for a long moment. Those 3 operations represented millions in revenue, years of work building relationships and infrastructure. But Amara saw him weighing it against her safety, against the possibility of another accident that wasn't really an accident. "Done," he said finally. "But I want assurances. Real ones, not just your word." They spent the next hour hammering out details. Lawyers would be involved, contracts signed, money transferred. It was surreal watching these 2 men negotiate over criminal enterprises like they were discussing real estate deals. But by the end, they had an agreement. Minho would get what he wanted, Jinwoo would keep Amara safe, everyone could go back to their separate corners. As they left the restaurant, Jinwoo was quiet. Amara could feel the tension radiating off him. "You just gave up a huge part of your empire," she said once they were alone in his car, "because of me, because of a threat that might not even have been real." Jinwoo looked at her, and there was no hesitation in his voice when he spoke. "It was worth it. You're worth it. Money and territory, I can always get more. But you," he stopped, seeming to gather courage, "you brought me back to life. After 3 years of being numb, of just going through the motions, you made me remember what it feels like to care about something beyond business. I'm not going to let someone take that away. Not again." Amara felt tears prick her eyes. She had been trying so hard not to fall completely for Jinwoo, to maintain some distance, to protect herself. But in that moment, sitting in his car with Seoul's lights spread out around them, she gave up pretending. "I love you," she said. "I know that's probably stupid and complicated, and I look like your dead girlfriend, which makes it all kinds of messed up, but I love you anyway." Jinwoo reached over and took her hand. "You're not Naomi," he said. "You never were. Yes, you look like her, and that's what first drew me to you, but I fell in love with Amara, with your strength and your talent, and your refusal to be anyone other than exactly who you are. You made me want to be better, made me want to build something real instead of just accumulating power." They sat there holding hands, and then Jinwoo leaned in and kissed her. It was gentle and tentative, like he was afraid she might disappear if he wasn't careful. Amara kissed him back, pouring 3 months of growing feelings into it, all the fear and attraction and hope she had been carrying. When they finally pulled apart, Jinwoo was smiling. "So, what happens now?" he asked. "Where do we go from here?" Amara thought about it. Thought about the job she loved, the city she was finally starting to feel at home in, the man she had fallen in love with despite every reason not to. "Forward," she said simply. "We go forward. You work on making your businesses more legitimate. I keep designing and creating, and we figure out how to build a life together that doesn't involve shady deals and dangerous enemies." "That sounds perfect," Jinwoo said. "It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is," Amara replied. "But I'm pretty good at difficult things. Moving halfway across the world alone, remember? Compared to that, dealing with your complicated life should be manageable." Jinwoo laughed, really laughed, and Amara realized it was the first time she had heard him sound genuinely carefree. They drove back to his penthouse, and Amara stayed the night for the first time. They talked until dawn about their pasts and their futures, about dreams and fears, and all the things people share when they decide to trust someone completely. In the following months, things changed gradually, but profoundly. Jinwoo began the slow process of extracting himself from his more questionable operations, focusing on legitimate businesses. It would take years to fully transition, but he was committed to building something clean. Amara's career flourished. Her work for Park Marketing Solutions gained recognition, and she started getting offers from other companies, though she stayed where she was, happy and fulfilled. Minho kept his word, staying in his territory and leaving them alone. The threat that had seemed so immediate faded into background noise. Life normalized, or as normal as it could be when you were dating a former crime boss who was trying to go straight. Amara and Jinwoo moved in together after 6 months, finding an apartment that was theirs rather than just his. Keisha came to visit and was surprised to find her friend genuinely happy and safe. "Maybe you were right to stay," she admitted, "even if you scared the hell out of me." A year after that taxi ride that started everything, Jinwoo took Amara back to Bukchon Hanok village, to the exact spot where he had found her taking photographs. "I stood here trying to work up the courage to approach you," he said. "I was terrified you would think I was crazy or dangerous, that you would run and I would lose the chance to know you." "Best decision I ever made, staying to talk to you," Amara said, "even though you were a little bit crazy and definitely dangerous." Jinwoo laughed and pulled out a small box. Then he dropped to one knee, and Amara's breath caught. "Amara Jackson," he said, "you came to Seoul looking for opportunity and gave me something infinitely more valuable. You gave me hope. You gave me a reason to be better than I was. Will you marry me?" Amara didn't hesitate. "Yes," she said, pulling him up to kiss him. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 3 months later in a small ceremony that blended Korean and American traditions, attended by friends from both their worlds. Keisha was maid of honor and cried through the entire ceremony. Min-soo, who had become a good friend to both of them, served as Jinwoo's best man. Standing at the altar, looking at Jinwoo's face as he said his vows, Amara thought about that rainy night when she had just wanted to go home and forget about Seoul. She thought about the strange man who had chased her taxi because she reminded him of someone he had lost. She thought about all the unlikely moments that had led them here, to this perfect, imperfect life they were building together. Sometimes the best things come from the strangest beginnings, she thought. Sometimes you have to take crazy risks and trust impossible situations. Sometimes you have to let yourself be found by someone who needs you as much as you need them. After the wedding, they honeymooned in Atlanta so Amara could show Jinwoo where she came from. Then they returned to Seoul, to the life they were creating together. Jinwoo continued transforming his business empire into something legitimate and clean. Amara opened her own design studio, helping other international creatives find their place in Seoul. They talked about eventually having children, about dividing time between Korea and America, about all the futures spreading out before them. On their first anniversary, Jinwoo surprised Amara with a gift. It was a painting, abstract and beautiful, done in the colors of the Seoul sunset. At the bottom, the artist had written a simple dedication, "For Amara, who taught me to see beauty again." Amara cried when she read it. Happy tears this time. "How did I get so lucky?" she asked, leaning into Jinwoo's embrace. "A year ago, I was broke and desperate and about to give up on Seoul. Now I have everything I ever wanted, and things I didn't even know to dream about." Jinwoo kissed the top of her head. "I'm the lucky one," he said. "You saved me, Amara. You brought me back from a place I didn't think I could return from. You showed me second chances are real." They stood together at the window of their apartment, looking out over Seoul's endless lights, over the city that had brought them together in the most unlikely way. Neither of them knew what the future held, what challenges or joys waited around corners they couldn't see, but they knew they would face it together, this Korean man and this American woman who had found each other through grief and chance and something that felt like destiny. The city spread out before them, full of possibility and promise, full of all the life they were building one day at a time. And somewhere out there, in the endless flow of people and traffic and neon lights, other unlikely stories were beginning, other connections being made, other futures being written by people brave enough to chase taxis in the rain, to trust strangers who became lovers, to believe that sometimes the craziest risks lead to the most beautiful destinations. But that was their story now, Amara and Jinwoo's, and it was still being written, still unfolding with each choice they made, each morning they woke up together, each moment they chose love over fear. It wasn't the story either of them expected to live, But it was theirs, and it was real, and it was more than enough. It was everything.